What is going on, everybody? So today we're going to be talking about. Actually, we're going to be talking to Cathy Wappel. She's past guest Jim Wappel's wife. She also paints figures. Today, I thought we'd go over like basing for like when you get a figure on the base, and you paint it blue on accident because the rest of the figure's blue, but you got to figure out something to put on top. Stuff like that. And here's how's it going, Cathy?
Hi, Josh. I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. So let's plug some of you're basically on Twitch and YouTube, right? Or just Twitch?
I'm on Twitch and I'm on More Than Dice. It's more _ dice because that is a podcast that a couple friends of mine and I do every Sunday night. So tonight, later, we'll be doing our podcast, and that is live on Twitch, and then we upload it to YouTube after, and a bunch of audio sites. But we just talk about the hobby and tabletop gaming and role-playing games and all kinds of stuff. And usually one of us is painting during the stream.
No, it's really cool channel because you guys talk from movies to what you're working on, like board games, I think.
Yeah, it's really just kind of a nerd fest.
With alcohol involved. Right?
There's alcohol involved. There's, that's a thing that happens. And then, so during the week, on that channel, I paint miniatures. John streams MechWarrior Online in the evenings. That's my co-host. And during the day, I stream my painting, and then on Fridays, I read. I have started reading Pulp Fiction of the early 1900s out loud on Fridays, and we've been working our way through some of the Conan the Cimmerian books by Robert E. Howard, better known as Conan the Barbarian. And I had never read them, and they were written in the 1930s. And it's been fun. They're so cheesy.
Yeah, I bet they're. Yeah, I could see that. So anyway, basically, what do you usually start with when you're trying to do the base? Do you put the figure on it, or do you keep the figure off of it?
Well, what I first do is determine, is it a sprue miniature? Is it like a Bones miniature, or the Reaper miniatures that have those what we call broccoli bases already attached? And if there's a base attached like that, I will cut off the base. I'll take just a snipper, one that is sturdy, that I don't care about, and I will snip away all the metal around the feet. And it takes a little bit of time to do that. If it's a Bones model, obviously it doesn't take that long, but that's always the first thing to do. Now, Jim uses a razor saw to saw off those broccoli bases when we're painting models that have the bases already attached. I prefer to just clip them off. It's either way. And then we drill into the feet, because when we first started painting minis, it really was. Now, I have a couple of minis right here that are from when we first started painting minis. And you can see there's not a lot to it. It's just the base, a little bit of gravel, a little bit of sand. Now the gravel and sand is painted. We did eventually learn that. For the first couple of years, I think we didn't even bother painting the sand and gravel. And this is from maybe the third year that we were painting minis. And but that was kind of that's as fancy as our bases were getting right there at that time. Just sand, gravel. Now you can see that the sprue is in the slot, so wasn't pinning them on yet. But once we started doing more things like this, where now you see there's a little texture. I apologize for this camera being upside down. Normally it's not. But
yeah, but it's fine.
in,
We can see it all. It's fine.
So you can see there's a little texture on this. It's not just flat with sand and gravel. And what this is a chunk of Sculpey. And that is one of our favorite things to use is the Sculpey. We use the Sculpey Classic. It's the regular white original Sculpey because when you roll it out in sheets and bake it flat, so we run it through a clay extruder / pasta maker.
Oh,
And
okay.
it flattens it out into these little strips, like lasagna noodles. And we put them on a ceramic tile and bake them. I mean, you can use a cookie sheet too, but my cookie sheets are for cookies. But the ceramic tile works just fine, goes in the oven, follow the directions on the package, and when you pull it out, what we do is we break it apart. So this is Sculpey. This is this top little flat piece with the cobblestones in it.
Yeah.
Is also Sculpey. That's Sculpey.
How did you get the texture in that?
This was a Green Stuff World texture roller.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty certain this is actually one that Jim made. So this is the firm Sculpey, which is gray. The firm Sculpey works great with the texture rollers. The original white Sculpey is too soft and mushy for the texture rollers, and it will just get up in the texture and get messy. The firm Sculpey really takes the detail much better. Now, is this guy just pinned or is he glued? He was glued, but look, there's a pin. So
okay.
There's a pin, so I can glue him again. That's not a big deal.
Oh, okay.
so two bases. One, I carved the cobblestones into the Sculpey. You can see that it's the white Sculpey because the paint's not on there right there.
Yeah.
And it's really soft and easy to carve into. So you bake it first, and then you can carve into it, a tile design. You can carve into it cobblestones. You can carve mosaic into it. You can get fancy. It isn't going to be as crisp as this kind of base because those texture rollers are laser etched, I think, and 3D printed, and so they're really precise. And the firm Sculpey accepts that detail really sharply.
And the texture rolls, is that why you lay out a long thin sheet and then just cut what you need, right?
We were doing the long thin sheets before we got texture rollers, only because when you run it through a pasta maker, the noodle size is only going to be about this wide. It's only going to be about 3 inches wide at maximum.
Oh, okay.
So So you end up with all these strips, and we always would break it apart, like this, where you can see that the edges are broken,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's always been something that Jim and I both have done. Is break it to look kind of like it's a ruin. It's kind of a little vignette. Each base is like a little scene.
No, and that's really cool. And the cool part about this is a lot of this stuff that we're going to talk about today can apply to like model cars, armor dioramas, and stuff too. That's the cool thing about a lot of this stuff.
Now, here's one where I carved in the tile floor. So I carved the tile in. I drew right onto the Sculpey with a pencil. I took a scribing tool, a sculpting tool, and then just scraped out the. I use wood carving tools for that too. They work really well with the white Sculpey. So, and you can see that it accepts the paint and the primer really well. And underneath it, as is the case with most of our bases, there's a little bit of cork. There's a little cork, and you can see that sand and gravel underneath there.
So is that like the pre-made stuff? I'll have to switch my camera, or is that actual sand and gravel?
It's actual sand and like Woodland Scenics, small sort of gravel. That's what they called it. It was some kind of gravel. So I've always just called it gravel and sand.
Oh, okay.
And I also use medium ballast. I use a mix of the three. First, I apply the larger pieces, and then I apply the medium ballast, and then the final thing is the sand, because the sand, gets down into the crevices of all the bigger stuff.
No, yeah. I mean, it it's all pretty cool at the end of the day. So question, when you're cooking that Sculpey in the oven, you're actually using your cooking stove oven, or do you using the toaster oven thing?
We don't have a toaster oven yet. That's on the list of things to get. So we just use the regular oven.
And does that give off a pretty good smell, or is it pretty? It's not going to change like the flavor of food after you cook it, right?
No, it's not. It's not. That was a concern for me, but that doesn't do it. And I don't ever bake Sculpey on my cooking stuff. That's why I use the ceramic tiles. So somebody mentioned in the chat about mosaic sculpture, and this is one that I did that's a larger scale thing, and all the bricks are made out of baked Sculpey.
That's so cool. It is really cool, like to watch, like when you and Jim both do try to figure out what you're going to do with the bases, and you get the skull. Like it's really an education. So what are some of the tools that would help you get to that spot?
Probably for not being prepared, I happen to have, well, this is my workstation, so I have all my stuff right here. So let's see what we have. We have the X-Acto knife, and this one I like to use that little blade.
Oh, okay.
That one's handy. I have another X-Acto that has the regular blade. These little sanding sticks are fantastic, especially if you're doing 3D printed models, because they also work great for getting rid of the the little support bumps and stuff. And it's just like emery board, little sanding sticks.
Oh, cool.
That's my crappy beat up side cutter that I use for snipping metal bases and paper clips and stuff. And you can see it's nicked all to hell, but you know, it's going strong. I've had this thing for, I don't know, 15 years.
Wow.
Toothbrush. You know, when you're carving away all the little bits of white Sculpey, it's very handy to have a toothbrush. You can brush away all that stuff. I have, of course, green stuff. I also use that a lot for bases. This base that I did for this old Ralpartha Cthulhu guy, now he came on a metal base. He was on a metal base, and I wanted to match the texture of his original base with green stuff. So that's, sorry if that's a little out of focus, but
No, it looks fine. It you know.
So that's all green stuff, all these stones, just to match the oops, just to match the original base, because I didn't want to saw off the base on that one. But yeah, pin vise, obviously, you could see in this one where the holes are, where the model is intended to go.
Oh, okay.
In that. So every base, even as small as this one, this little model, her feet are pinned, or maybe just one, is pinned to the base. Because when you have a base that's sculpey like that, and you just glue a model to it, it's going to fall off. It's just going to get ripped right off. This is another one that I used Sculpey to build up around the original base, because this is a 3D printed model, and there's a little round base in there, but I wanted to put it on a regular sized, 30 millimeter base. So I used green stuff to match the cobblestone texture of the base that prints out with the model. So yeah, green stuff is also very handy for bases. And anytime I have extra green stuff left over, oh, you can't even see that. I'm always making random sausages, really, is what it is. It's just these long tubes with green stuff, just in case you need, a cylinder.
So can you shape that into something else after it's dried?
Oh no.
Okay.
But if you have a little, hold on. Let me just get this out of the bag. So these little things, I just rolled them out on my table with the green stuff, because I had leftover green stuff, and anybody who's ever worked with green stuff always has a little leftover green stuff. So this, if you take your X-Acto knife, you can cut tiny little discs all the way down it. And those are fantastic for really big scale rivets, or for coins on a
that's cool.
on a base, if you want to do like treasure or something. It was actually Jim who came up with that idea of making coins that way. I thought that was a pretty good idea.
I would not have thought of that.
Yeah.
Would not have thought of that.
Paper clips, of course. But now we come to the sculpting tools. Tools that are good for sculpting green stuff, and tools that are good for carving into Sculpey. So Ow, they're sharp. Ow, they're sharp.
Yeah, we don't need to time out for an injury.
No, they're not. These aren't bladed. Well, only this one has a little bit of a blade. I have magnets in here too. So wood carving tools are great for carving white Sculpey. The extra firm gray Sculpey is, well, really firm, so it's much harder. It's much harder to carve into it. But yeah, wow, okay, so I have rare earth magnets holding this stuff together. Tweezers. This is the scribing tool that is my favorite thing to use for carving tile texture or mosaic texture. It's got this sharp little concave point at the end, and anytime you press down and you pull, it scores whatever whatever you're pressing down on, and so it makes fantastic. If I had any pieces of Sculpey here, I would show you what I'm talking about, but I was not prepared. And of course, the dental tool. We all use that, right? Everybody uses the dental tool for working green stuff and carving into Sculpey, and it's like the perfect tool.
Okay. I haven't, me personally, I've not used green stuff yet at all. I was gonna try to start getting into using Sculpey on some of these like towel bases and stuff, but because I have a bunch of that, because my grandmother used to use Sculpey, and what is this other stuff called? It's just polymer clay.
Okay, so like Fimo. I know Fimo is another brand of clay, and we've tried using that too, but that's similarly to the firm Sculpey, polymer clay. Fimo. It's all polymer clay, but Fimo is kind of rubbery and hard.
Yeah, see this stuff.
So the consistency of it, once it's baked, being rubbery and hard, it's harder to carve into it. Like, you can sculpt into it beforehand, before you bake it, which is another option, of course. But Sculpey seems to just work, I don't know, so much better. We've tried Fimo and other brands, and we'll always go back to the Sculpey. The original Sculpey for any kind of base that you want to carve into, and the extra firm Sculpey for using texture rollers.
So I know what green stuff is, but for the guys that are watching that may not, because they're modeling stuff, right? Explain kind of how that works.
Green stuff is a 2-part epoxy putty. It's similar to plumber's putty. In fact, it's possible that Knead-A-Tight green stuff is just a brand of plumber's putty. I'm not sure. So you have the blue and you have the yellow, and you mix them together. It becomes green and immediately starts curing. And so there's a catalyst, and it cures and it gets hard. But before it gets hard, you can push it into, well, you can sculpt with it. You can push it into any shape. And there are people who will carve into it after it's cured, but it's a lot harder to carve into once it's cured. It's possible, though.
So my question is, what's the working time? Do you know? Probably about 30 minutes.
I'm not really sure. I've never actually timed it.
Okay. So Aries Styrene has a question. So the thick Sculpey, you put the pattern in and then bake?
So when you're using Green Stuff World texture rollers and you roll out, I mean, basically the texture roller from Green Stuff World is a rolling pin with texture on it. And as you roll it into the Sculpey, it leaves that texture along the flat Sculpey, like this one. I don't know if I have any other ones here that have that. Oh, there's one. So here's one that's not painted yet. And actually, that's a good way to see what this base is made out of. So you can see the gray Sculpey. That's the extra firm Sculpey, and the texture in this is from the texture rolling the texture roller across the Sculpey, and you can see, if I can get this right, you can see the thickness of the Sculpey is quite thin. It's really just a thick pasta noodle. Because the clay extruder you run it through is basically a noodle maker. It's a pasta maker. So you're only ever going to get that, that thickness. You can go a little bit thinner too. Actually, I think you could go a little thicker, but there's really no reason to.
But I mean, really, at the end of the day, it's just preference, right? You could just roll it on there and then stick it in the oven, right?
You roll it on there, you stick it in the oven, yeah, and then it's done. And then you can break it apart, or you can leave it whole, depending on what you're using it for. Or you could stick it in the oven and don't put any texture on it. And then you do like I did with this one. And with the baked strip of Sculpey, you just take your carving tool and you carve that, design into it afterwards.
But you couldn't use the roller after the oven, right? It had to be before.
You cannot use the roller after the oven. Once the Sculpey is hard, you can't get that texture into it. Now, originally, those things were developed to be used with green stuff, and I know that there's people that do use it with green stuff. I think you have to use some kind of oil or something so that it doesn't stick to the roller, because green stuff, another important thing to know about green stuff is it's super sticky. It will stick to anything and everything, and it does. And it always sticks to the thing you don't want it to stick to.
Oh.
But what I do is I have a little bit of water, a little cup of water next to me, and I dip my tools in the water, and that makes it not stick to the water.
So Fred asked, have you ever tried using Milliput?
I have not used Milliput. I know there's a lot of people out there that do, and I've wanted to, but it wasn't ever something that was easy for me to get. I mean, now with the internet, shopping being what it is, I'm sure I could get some. But I've grown used to using green stuff and Sculpey. But yeah, honestly, I really need to get some Milliput just so that I can see what it does. There's another thing that I totally forgot to mention. It's another 2-part epoxy, and it's called Aves Epoxy Sculpt. And that's another one that it's actually similar to Milliput, because I've heard that you can add water to Milliput and it changes the consistency a little bit, which is something you can do with Epoxy Sculpt. You can actually make it like a slimy slip with it, you know, like regular clay. When you add water to it, it forms a little thin kind of, you know, a slip. That's the only word I know for it, you know. And it helps hold things together, but you can also smooth textures with it. Like if you have a pitted texture, if you have a metal model that has pitting on it, or you have a seam that you want to fill in, you can use epoxy sculpt, really watered down and mushy, and put it in there. And when you let it set up, you can sand it and you can carve into that too.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's cool. Um, so how do you make it to where the figure looks like it's been there forever? You know what I'm saying? Like if it's in like a sand or
Like this guy.
yeah, I mean, are you actually putting like some of the texture on the figure a little bit, or are you just kind of plopping it down?
This model was just pinned to the base. All the foliage was added after it's been painted, but I think part of it is uh, going back to the beginning with these old things, where it's not a fancy base. It's just a little bit of sand and gravel. But we started painting the sand and gravel. And when you start painting the sand and gravel, now all of a sudden, because it's painted the same way that the miniature is with the same paints, and it's all the same style, and the lighting of it is going to be similar. Now it all looks like it belongs together, as opposed to earlier. And I even might have something. No, I don't. I kind of do. This is one of my first models. This is one of my Blood Bowl models. That was kind of what got me into painting minis. But you can see that this base is very plain. All it is static grass. Static grass and flock.
Now,
That's it.
is there a way to put that stuff on to where it looks okay, or is there you just spreading it on with glue?
What I had done is I took a brush and brushed glue onto it. And then I just sort of dipped the whole thing into a little pot of static grass, and I let it sit for a bit, and then I turn it over and tap the bottom, and it seemed like gravity sort of made things stand up a little bit. Of course, this one, well, it doesn't look so good, and I don't really use static grass much anymore, so I am not the authority on making static grass look like lush grass. I hear that there's that static tool that you can use to make the grass all stand up straight. I have never used that, but I've seen other people use it, and wow, it makes it look like your model is walking across a lawn.
Yeah, I've seen those in that static grass applicator or whatever it's called. It's pretty spendy too.
Yeah. I see Fred's question. He says I use a lot of natural elements like sand, rocks, twigs, etc. in my vignettes. And that was one of the things that I wanted to say is there's a lot of natural stuff in this. There's I don't even know if there's cork. There's cork. Yeah, there is. There's cork. There's Sculpey. There's tree bark in this. There's plants, like little dried plants, the kind that you can get at Michael's for different craft stuff. But it's everything's been painted. You know, even these little bits of, let's see if you can see it. These little bits of vines, they look like vines that are there. Even that has a little bit of paint on it. Not a lot. So
No,
all the rocks and all the sand and gravel and Sculpey and bark and everything has been painted. And so it all looks cohesive.
And what's that thing about you have to like cook the natural stuff a little bit so it doesn't grow?
I've never had a problem with things growing out of my bark, ever.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like you hear that all the time. And it's like, but you don't hear it from everybody.
You don't hear it from us because we don't do it. Jim and I make a bajillion bases using bark and things like that, twigs and stuff, twigs that we just find on our walks around the neighborhood. And we've never had a problem with anything to do with that.
Okay.
They all always remain the same. Nothing discolors. Nothing is growing in them. There aren't bugs or anything.
So this is going to be some of the stuff I'm going to be trying next when it comes to bases. Like Battle Snow. I've got Army Painter's got all kinds of stuff, and I went down that rabbit hole to get a bunch of their products. Like there's Green Grass, Battlefield Rock.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if it works. I'm gonna try it, but
I'm sure it'll work great.
This is the one I'm probably gonna try to use the most. I think. At the end of the day.
Yeah, they always do these different colored things, and I would end up painting over it all anyways. Oh, those are always great. The tufts.
So how do these work? Is that?
Oh, the grass tufts?
Yeah.
I like to cut them apart even smaller. I'll take a tweezers and I'll take a scissors and I'll cut them into even smaller, less regular pieces so that I can have, I don't know if I have any bases here that have grass tufts on them. I don't think so. Nope. But yeah, then I just take a little dot of super glue, and I'm holding the grass tuft by the grass part with my tweezers, and I put a little dot of super glue on the bottom part because the adhesive on the grass tufts, it doesn't stick. You want to glue that to the base. And yeah, you just hold it with the tweezers, apply the glue, stick it where you want it, press it down with the end of the tweezers. And you want tweezers where you don't care if you're going to get a little bit of glue on the tip.
Okay.
And just hold it down for a little bit until it's dried in place. And not every grass tuft should be the same size. You want them to be, non-uniform.
Well, see, this one has like 12 of the bigger ones, 35 of the medium ones, and 30 of the small. So I got the one that had the different sizes in it already.
Yeah. And it depends, again, what scale of model you're working with, too. Now, the scale of models that I'm usually working with, I will absolutely cut those small grass tufts into even smaller pieces that are only maybe a couple millimeters wide.
Oh, okay. Just to kind of make it more realistic.
Yeah, just to add just a little tiny grass tuft of, when your model is just this scale, you don't need a whole, a few giant grass tufts are going to look a little odd,
Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying. Okay.
So, which would be different if you were doing something like 1/35th scale or even bigger.
How big is that? Is that 128?
This is this is like 28 millimeter human scale, but this is a knoll, so it's probably about 35 millimeters.
Oh, okay.
30, something like that.
Yeah, see, I want to try to use some of that stuff on these bases.
Yes.
But, I haven't gotten that far. I haven't even finished painting these guys yet. And that's why I thought, I'd bring you on and have this conversation because I want to start heading in that direction.
Yeah, that would be the perfect base to throw the well, you want to first figure out what materials you're going to use, where are you going to put the rocks on the base, and then start from big to small. Start with like the biggest rocks if you're going to put rocks on the base. Like you were showing the army painter those pebbles.
Yeah.
And then there's the smaller scale rocks that you've got there, and then there's the more sandy kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So you can start big, and then as you're gluing the things in there, and then work smaller, and then like you can use a brush to spread PVA glue over the whole thing, and then just sprinkle a little bit of your medium texture stuff, and then just lay sand out over the whole thing. Let it dry for a while, then knock that sand off. I like to take a toothbrush once it's all completely dry and just go over it lightly with the toothbrush to make sure that all the extra sand and stuff is knocked off of it before I prime.
No, I mean, it's just. And then what glue do you use?
I will use both. I will use both PVA glue and cyanoacrylic glue.
See, I like it's Gorilla Glue, but and then I like this
I like
Citadel
Gorilla
stuff.
Glue. This is one that's one that I like a lot. That Instacure.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they're all pretty close to the same. This is one of the thicker ones. I like the thicker ones. Some people like the thinner ones. Depends on what you're doing. Yeah, a lot of preference depends on what you're doing. If you're doing tiny little models like I'm doing, it's going to be a little different than if you're doing big scale models. This one was a combination of PVA glue and super glue because this is layers of tree bark. So there's like a few pieces of tree bark stacked on top of each other here. And what I ended up doing is putting a few dots of super glue in between my dots of PVA glue so that I could just press it down and the PVA glue would fill the gaps in between, but the super glue would dry faster to hold it into place faster.
Oh, okay. I gotcha. And how was the orange juice for the base for that?
Delicious.
It was either orange juice or lemonade, right?
You know, it's the juice cap. Yes. It's the Tropicana juice cap. They're the best. They have that Gothic arch thing. But this is another one that's a whole bunch of different things. So the face is a mold taken from a cyborg basing thing.
Oh, okay.
So we had these cyborg base kits, and he does these gorgeous faces. Like, so they're resin kits in case you ever want it just straight up basing that's just all textures and little sculpted features like this. Yeah, those are fantastic. But we just made a mold of it so that we could use a few statue heads of our own, and it's just, we just pressed a little bit of Sculpey in it. It's not even the whole head, it's like part of the head, and you can see that the other part is just broken Sculpey on the back end of it. But I wanted it to look like a submerged, excuse me, a submerged statue. And this is an underwater base. I mean, obviously there's no water effect or anything, but there's starfish and crabs. And the starfish and crabs I sculpted using green stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
And then I did use a couple of real snail shells.
Like actual animal snail shells or the fake stuff?
Actual tiny animal snail shells.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, you can get bags of tiny shells at Michael's, so that was perfect for that. But yeah, there's a bunch of little crabs in there, and they were green stuff, and I sculpted them all on a piece of plastic. It was just like this, like the kind of plastic that Ziploc bags are out of, because it's so flexible that when the green stuff sticks to it, it's easy to pull the green stuff away once it's cured. So I just sculpted them all flat on the on a piece of plastic like that, let them cure up, and then I cut them off and glued them with super glue onto the base. So, you know, it's just a lot of things you can do.
No, and that looks really awesome. Yeah, that looks really, really awesome. So how we doing on time, Cathy? We got what, about 10 minutes?
Yeah. I'll show you the model this goes. The model this goes to. So.
Oh wow.
It's a anglerfish thing.
What is that from?
That's a Artisan Guild model.
Oh, okay.
That's 3D printed. Yeah.
They have some cool stuff. They definitely have some cool stuff.
And again, pinned.
You try to pin most of the stuff that you do, right? So it stays better?
Everything, especially when you know that it's going to be shipped to somebody else. You don't want the model falling off the base. But yeah, all of these, they're everything is pinned. These are my own personal Nurgle models.
Oh yeah, I remember when you were doing those. That pumpkin one turned out really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, though his head is it was all about pumpkins last year, it seems like. His head is green stuff because I lost the original head for the model. So I had to improvise. And as I was assembling it during my Twitch stream, I asked the chat what I should do for the head, and they said, you should make it a pumpkin. So, yeah.
Yeah.
That's how that happened.
So unfortunately, Cathy had it hard out today. So we're getting to be about that time, I think. Did you have any questions for me?
Did I?
Yeah.
Um,
I usually ask that because it's kind of fair. I get to ask you all kinds of stuff.
Are you usually doing scale models? What scale models do you usually do?
So at the moment, like I do 1/24th. This is actually the Batwing from the Val Kilmer Batman.
Okay.
So I do a lot of different stuff. And then I just printed this guy out. This is Goro from Mortal Kombat.
Oh, that's cool. I want to do stuff at that scale. I'm always doing these tiny things, but I think it would be really cool to do some kind of garage kit size stuff.
Yeah, this turned out really, really cool. I did mess up the base on one side, but it'll still stand. So I'm just gonna leave that one because that one's for me. But
yeah, why not?
And then I mean I do the Warhammer stuff. I do model cars, boats. Lately, I've been trying to get my resin printer to work, and I'm still struggling like you can't believe on that one.
That is a thing that I hear from everybody. Everybody who gets the resin printer has to struggle with it for a while before they dial in the settings that are perfect for them.
Yeah,
And it's different for everyone because the environment plays a factor. You know?
And then you have this guy.
Oh wow.
That's just the legs. And that's the Warlord Titan I printed out.
Wow.
So, like I said, I try to do a lot of different stuff. I mean, when I switch the camera, there's a lot of the box art from the model kits, and there's a lot of different stuff even on that wall behind me.
Yeah, I'm looking at that.
Yeah, see?
I recognize some things there, yeah.
Yeah, see, I mean, you got Prince guy here, the Halo Warthog, the Bat boat that goes with this Batwing. I've done Gravedigger. There's the Age of Sigmar box set.
Oh, I remember seeing your Age of Sigmar stuff when you were painting those.
Yeah, like the blimp. It was a cool build because my son wanted it, but I don't know if I'd do that one again. I've done War Machine figures. I want to get into kind of doing some like dioramas for like military stuff.
Oh, that's funny you should mention that. Because my one historical scale model project that I started is a Sherman.
Oh, okay.
And
That's cool.
And what I want to do now, I had to research stowage because I had never heard the term until I saw somebody else's Sherman tank and they mentioned the stowage and they had all this extra stuff that they added on to it. And I was like, wow, okay, that looks really good. Now I need to go research stowage, which of course led me down the rabbit hole of finding pictures of tanks and all of the things that people put on them and why they put things on them and how the armor of the Sherman was or wasn't, as the case may be, and putting treads and stuff on the front of it. So it was interesting because it was stuff I never knew about. But what I want to do is take one of those old photos, and build the diorama using the photo reference. And that's something I've never done either.
Yeah, I'm not. I haven't tackled that myself either. But I mean, and that's the cool thing, kind of why I got into miniatures, right? Because you learn some of those, like dry brushing, and then take that to the interior of a car, makes all the like dash lines and, you know, the instrument panels just pop.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like a lot of the miniature stuff applies to the hobby in multiple different ways, and then like the basing, it's just a different scale, but it's still all the same technique. It just, and that's some of the cool stuff about, you know, trying to bring on some of the figure painters on here, getting them to talk a little bit of what they do, because it all applies from railroad to, you know, slot car tracks to, you know, whatever you're trying to do, right?
It definitely carries over. There's a lot of crossover, and there's so much that I could learn, that I have learned from people who do model railroading and scale models and historical miniatures, because they tend to focus more, it seems like, on how things look in the real world, where I was coming from Blood Bowl and Warhammer and 40K, where all the basing that I had seen for that seemed a bit more cartoony or heroic scale, you know. So they weren't quite as real looking, if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense.
And model railroaders and historical miniature painters really seem to have an eye for the tiny, realistic details. Cohen's scale models.
Oh, sorry. He does a lot of tanks too, so he's probably got that's a good hookup. Good tip. Inspiration for the military. And I do agree with this, Fred. Too much detail does kill, but when you're trying to make everything kind of look uniform, you know, you can't just brush on one color and then people do dock for that too.
I feel that though. Every time I look at the new Games Workshop models, I think too much detail is really distracting more than helpful. It's really nice that they have tons of cool little things on their models, but it often seems to be too much right now. Yeah, I agree, Fred. Keep it simple, stupid, right? That's a rule of thumb.
Yeah. So anyway, unless you have any other questions for me, Cathy, I'm gonna call this good, and I will talk to you in a couple minutes if that's
right on. That sounds great. Thanks again for having me on, and thank you everybody out there for watching.
I will talk to you in a couple minutes. All right, guys, that was Cathy. We learned quite a bit on basing today. Hopefully you learned as much as I did, because I got a couple tips on there and what tools, and but I will see you guys next week. Oh, up here.